Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
Support comes from Mercedes-Benz of Buckhead, where the power of electric meets the power of Mercedes. Introducing a lineup of electric vehicles, the EQB, the EQS sedan and SUV, the EQE sedan and SUV. The vehicles are all electric. The feeling is all Mercedes. Mercedesofbuckhead.com.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast. We are so glad that you are here this week. Both our strategists are here, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Brian Robinson, our Republican strategist. Been a minute since we've all been together, and Brian, we've missed you, so we're glad that you're back with us.
Thank you. So good to be here, and I apologize. For our audience, I had to cancel on Tharon and Lisa and Lily last minute. Last time, I had a medical procedure the first week of the year. They had me on this medication that felt like an axe had gone through my head. And so I was still in bed by the time y'all started recording last week. So I apologize for not being here. Excited about the new year. Excited about the double shows every week. Thank you to all the listeners who reached out after hearing y'all last week and gave me well wishes. I really appreciated it. And glad to get started.
Yeah, good to have you back. And you guys are fresh off of a visit. Where did y'all go this morning? And you guys rushed to the microphone to be here for Political Breakfast. We appreciate that so much. But y'all had a engagement this morning, right?
Yeah, it's something that Brian and I do a lot of. And, we are advertising to our listeners. If you ever want a really, sort of lively debate with Brian and I with a lot of candor, especially Lisa after he's had his morning coffee, he gets about 17 minutes into his speech and then he really gets going. But no, shout out to Leadership Cobb. I think Brian and I have been doing this now for about 45 years. And they invite us out to speak to their group, Lisa. And we're usually the kickoff sort of session at the state capitol. And so Terry Anulovich, who, also has a podcast, state representative from Cobb County, Burt Reeves, who's a former state rep from the Cobb area too, now works at Georgia Tech. They invite us in, and Brian and I just pretty much, Lisa, take a sort of smaller version of Political Breakfast and speak to a room, probably packed house of about 80 people, almost, 75 to 80 people this morning.
Bravo. Yeah, it's that time of year where politics, of course, is a very hot topic. Fani Willis, a very hot topic this week and last week and continues to be one. Just want to get your thoughts on that. And, timing is everything. And Tharon, I want to begin with you. The timing of all of this coming out, what are your thoughts on that? And what are you hearing from those people behind the scenes, specifically Democrats?
So, Lisa, when you think about the magnitude of this case, the historical value, how it's so unheard of that a district attorney from Fulton County, duly elected by the people of Fulton County, decided to prosecute and indict the former president of the United States of America. I mean, just to really frame this the right way for our listeners. So this is the biggest case, I believe, politically, that Fulton County, Georgia has ever seen, because it involves former President Donald Trump. With that being said, District Attorney Willis has said that these allegations that have come out against her and the special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, she will address in court filings. And my response to that, Lisa, is that, listen, we can't rush to judgment. We got to believe that she now has an opportunity to respond to these allegations that are made by a defendant's attorney, who I believe got a lot of this information from a divorce filing by the soon-to-be ex-wife. I think they're going through the divorce now of Nathan Wade, and now those divorce documents have been sealed. So you have the court filing, and then you have the court of public opinion. Let me talk about the court filing first. I believe that the district attorney, if you look at her sort of patterns, she has sort of allowed the responses from her office to be filed through the court, to go before the judge, to anything that she's been called to do. Former President Donald Trump did make a false claim that she had a romantic relationship previously with one of the gang members of the YSL, who I think was, arrested or was going to be on trial. She came out and addressed those. But we have to wait and see and what she says in the court filing, in the court of law, to these allegations that are very serious allegations, and they don't look good. which leads me to my next point, which is the court of public opinion. And unfortunately, because she's an elected official, because she is a district attorney who has just become so nationally recognized because of, even before this case, with just other cases, but definitely going after the former president of the United States of America, the timing, Lisa, that you mentioned, the timing of it, at a time where Nathan Wade, who is one of three special prosecutors, right? The other two prosecutors are paid the same hourly rate as Nathan Wade. I think the hourly rate is roughly about $250, which is, from what I heard, is a discount to the county. But she hired these three special prosecutors, black male, white female, who are paid the same amount of hourly rate. And the only one that's being questioned by this attorney of the defendant is his qualifications to prosecute the case, which, many would say that he is qualified to prosecute the case, but they're not raising these questions about the other two special prosecutors. But then there's these very serious allegations about them being in a romantic relationship. And that is where the court of public opinion and their sort of unwillingness at this point, as we're taping, to address all allegations, but particularly the ones that have been made that they're involved in a romantic relationship. And then this is the one, Lisa, that I actually think that I'm waiting to see what the district attorney says to this, is that the money that Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor, who's a defense attorney, former judge, former prosecutor as well, that he's using the money that Fani Willis is paying him from the county office to fund these romantic sort of trips. And so I'll wrap up here in just a second, but I think that I don't want to rush to judgment, because I'm waiting to see what this district attorney has to say about this. The optics are not great. The timing of it is something that you knew that the Trump campaign or the people who were the defendants, they were going to come with something to try to distract and push back on the case, because it actually thus far has been going well for the prosecution, right? We've had people plead guilty, and you have these upcoming trials. But I don't want to get to the one of speculating about what friends or former colleagues, why they were hired, how they were being paid. But I just wanted to focus on two things. One, the qualifications of this man who's going through a divorce and his qualifications being questioned, and the other two prosecutors are not. And then the second thing is that if the district attorney Willis has decided to slow walk a little bit the response on this one, I do think, and the AJC wrote about this, it does give her critics an opportunity to criticize. Again, it don't mean that these allegations are true or false, but I think that we have to wait to see what she says in the court. And then I think she has to address the public opinion, which she did, Lisa. She was at a church this past Sunday. She talked about this case. She called Nathan a superstar attorney. She said that he was qualified to do the job. And she just basically, also said, and I don't want to misquote her here, but she also said that, I quote, that she called Nathan Wade a superstar, a great friend, a great lawyer. She also said professional experience. He definitely has a lot of accomplishments. And she said, I'm just asking God, is that some way that some people will never see a black man as qualified? And so these are her words, not my words. And these are kind of the responses that she's given us so far.
Yeah, she didn't address the alleged relationship at all. Brian, what are your thoughts, and what are you hearing behind the scenes in your camp in terms of, one, timing? Like Tharon said, the optics, aren't good. I think anybody would agree to that.
Yeah.
What are you hearing?
Well, first, I want to congratulate Tharon on that answer. I thought it was very earnest and straightforward and very fair to Fani Willis, but also very clear-eyed about the challenges posed by these allegations. I want to go at two of the things that he mentioned, or build upon them, rather. One, the allegation about the gang member made about a relationship with Fani Willis. She immediately came out and condemned that, called it untrue, and reached out to her staff and talked about it. That hasn't happened here. There hasn't been an acknowledgement of the charge. There hasn't been a yes or no, this is happening. And that is a distinct difference here. And I think that's something that she's going to have to address head on, because the stakes here are so very, very high. I do also want to address the issue of the qualifications and the nuances that are involved here. I, as y'all know, am very resistant to bringing the race issue into anything like this off the top, because in this particular case, I don't think anyone is saying that Nathan Wade isn't a good attorney. I don't think anyone is saying that he doesn't have impressive experience. When the case started, Fani hired someone who was known as an expert in RICO cases. And in fact, I remember doing a program with Tharon where he mentioned that, Fani's got some credibility on this, that she's gone to the expert, the person in the state who is best known for taking on RICO cases. Well, Nathan Wade is not known for RICO cases. And so when people go after his experience, I think it's fair to say that's what they mean, not that a black man can't be a qualified prosecutor. I think that's inflammatory and unnecessary, and I think the charges being leveled are fair, and I think that they are within the bounds of proper discourse. So what am I hearing from my folks, Lisa? And I'm hearing it more from conservative media outlets than I am from rank and file Republicans, but a lot of them nationally believe that this could implode the case, that the weight of all of this could fall in on Fani Willis, really undermine the credibility of the case. And then the Jack Smith case out of D.C., out of the DOJ, is the only one that is standing over some of these issues that are involved in the Fulton County case. So I think on my side, there's a thought that this could be the end of the road for the case, that is that big of a deal. And the second thing is, let's look at what was said by Speaker John Burns. Speaker Burns last year was asked, should the prosecutor oversight panel investigate Fani simply for carrying out this case against Trump and his quote-unquote co-conspirators? And he said no. And the governor said no. Those were courageous stands because a lot of their voters didn't want to hear that. This year, Speaker Burns says, I'm okay with that panel taking on this case. So you have somebody who has credibility on the issue, someone who has stood up for Fani in the past, saying, we got some new details here. This is new information, and this now gives us a hook to look into what is happening in this investigation.
Timing, though, talk specifically more about timing. Did all of this really just come to light? Timing, and it's a crucial time in the presidential race, as Brian indicated.
Yeah, and I'll get into the timing real quick. And let me be clear. I think Brian and I have talked about this case, and I focused on Fani Willis's ability to have experience in prosecuting RICO cases. I don't remember vividly.
She does too. You're right. Yeah.
I don't remember saying Nathan Wade was the person that she brought in. So I just want that point of clarification. She has a history when she was a prosecutor.
You were talking about the first guy. You were talking about the first guy when he got hired. The guy who I think he's at the same firm as Jason Carter, whatever that is.
Okay, maybe I did. In the response from the attorney immediately after District Attorney Fani Willis made the comments at the church, her response, the attorney's response, who made the claims, the allegations, was exactly what Brian said, that Nathan Wade has not prosecuted any quote-unquote RICO cases, right? But he is a former prosecutor, a former judge, and runs a successful, from what I'm hearing, sort of defense firm. But Lisa, you hit on the issue here. So again, I go back to, this is a case that's been going on for roughly 3 years, right? He's been paid, his firm has been paid $654,000 over 3 years, which means that he's been spending a lot of time on this case, and he's had some success. And he being the team, I mean, again, I remind our listeners, it's a team of 3. So this is just the guy that the Republicans have decided to go after. But if you look at the successes, I think, you've had 3 to 4 people plead guilty, and the Trump, case is getting closer and closer and closer, and it comes right on the heels of the Iowa caucuses. To your point, Lisa. And so now we're entered into a presidential election year where Donald Trump just won a convincing sort of landslide victory in Iowa, and he had to turn the juice up a little bit to get some meat to his base. And what better way to try to accuse with these allegations that an African-American district attorney could be having a romantic relationship with another African-American male who's the special prosecutor, which, by the way, Lisa, she, as the district attorney, has the full discretion to hire her special prosecutors. And I just don't believe this. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not they were romantically involved. Notice I'm kind of staying away from that because I want to wait to hear from her. I just don't think that, based on her history, based on her experience, based on how the case is going so far, that Fani Willis would have hired these 3 special prosecutors if she did not think they were qualified and capable of doing the job. And the heat has been turned up. I'm hearing that more possible plea deals are in the works. So Donald Trump knows that in order for him to beat these cases that he has against him, he had to sort of cast some doubt. He had to throw something out there to say, hey, I should, because remember, Lisa, this is coming after he made a motion that was unsuccessful to have the charges dropped, right? He's already been trying to pick holes at this case. He wanted it to be, quote unquote, a mistrial. And so then once that was unsuccessful, then that's when you saw these allegations come out. And he has quadrupled down on them in places like Iowa. I mean, everywhere he goes, he's talking about these charges, these allegations in Fulton County. So the timing of it is Brian talks about, look, if it's true, it could be really bad for the prosecution. If it's not true, and then it's a conversation of whether or not it's unlawful. Is it unethical, right? And so there's just so many avenues to this, but the timing is definitely something that I think has put this case and the prosecution in a posture that they got to respond. So how do you respond and keep the pressure on is what I'm sure they're talking about right now.
You know, interestingly, one thing about Nathan Wade is in the past, when working in Cobb County, he has gone after a judge there saying that if there's any hint of a conflict of interest, you should recuse yourself. And he even went on to say that that judge's appointment was overly political because his wife had been a senior staffer to Governor Perdue, and he got an appointment from Governor Perdue. So he has a history of going after these conflicts of interest and the politics behind the scenes. Those are words that now are coming back to haunt him a little bit. That's something I saw in the New York Post, going back to what I was saying about national conservative media taking a particular interest in this case. And you know, I appreciate so much of what Tharon is saying here about the problems that this poses for the prosecution. And I don't know that anyone is saying that Nathan Wade has done a bad job, but I don't think it matters either. I think if these charges are true, she has made a colossal error in judgment. And listeners know I have not been a demagogue attacking Fani Willis on this show. I was glad she beat the former DA a few years back. I thought she was going to be an improvement. And I have said I thought she had integrity. But she has made 2 major errors in judgment if these new allegations are true. One, she attended a fundraiser for the opponent of Burt Jones, now our lieutenant governor, and was removed from the ability to prosecute and investigate Burt Jones as a result. The judge in that case called it a "what were you thinking" moment. And we may now have an even bigger, even more monumental and impactful "what were you thinking" moment in this case now. Because if it's true, it does undermine the credibility of the case. And one problem in the political optics of this is it's embarrassing for the DA, that's not a legal condition, right? But politically, particularly as she gears up for her own reelect, this is a politically sticky wicket with her own constituency.
You know, there's so much information here that we don't know. And I just, again, want to just reinstate what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the case is derailed. I'm not saying that the case will be dropped. I actually think that this is a major distraction, but I believe that this prosecution has put forth a plan for disruption, so disruptive moments like this where these allegations are going to be made. Not saying that they knew that these allegations of a romantic or a personal relationship was going to be made. And so, we can't let our listeners sort of be derailed from the issue at hand here. I mean, this is a very serious prosecution that's looking at whether or not these 19 defendants, including the former president of the United States of America, broke the law. Did they participate knowingly or unknowingly or willing or unwillingly in a process to try to derail democracy, to try to use false claims, to participate in sort of the overturning of an election result? And so these are all things that, we got to make sure that we're refocused on. But this, again, Lisa, to your point about the timing and the optics, it does force us to not pay attention to who's up next, what's going on with the case, until she will address these allegations. And I just believe that the court filing, in which she's going to address them first, is a strategic long-term play, because now they got to be anticipating there may be other allegations that may be made. And then will you respond to all of them going forward? Because this trial is going to go on for at least another year or so. So I know that she's surrounded by very talented lawyers, legal experts. And there's also a political component to this as well, because as Brian mentioned, she is up for re-election, and she's got to make sure that, while she's prosecuting this case, she's got to hopefully try to get reelected as well.
From WABE Studios, the podcast where they read stories is a new children's storytelling podcast featuring notable Atlantans and performers reading classic and contemporary children's books. Each episode contains a story meant to entertain, inspire, and inform young listeners. No screens required. The podcast where they read stories features adaptations from both chapter books and picture books. Join us at wabe.org/stories podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts.
WABE.
Hey y'all, I'm Mark Kendall.
And I'm David Perdue.
And we're the hosts of What's Good Atlanta, the new weekly comedy podcast from WABE.
On What's Good Atlanta, we run down uplifting and unusual headlines from the universe known as Atlanta.
And while we may not be journalists, we are comedians, and we'll be breaking down news and breaking down the stories that make you smile.
We're just trying to see what's good, Atlanta.
Episodes drop Fridays at wabe.org or wherever you get your podcasts. I get mine from a guy named Craig.
Shout out to Craig.
Mm-hmm.
WABE.
Well, it seems all of this right now is playing in favor of the former president, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That recent AJC poll, showing him ahead of Biden, very interesting to some. Brian, what was your initial take on that?
Well, my initial take on that is that it's remarkably consistent with what we've been seeing. We saw a similar margin in New York Times polling back in the late fall. And, Tharon and I discussed that then. And there are some things that probably Democrats should hang their hat on. Like, for example, a lot of this polling shows Trump getting a astronomically high number of black voters, which we don't necessarily think is really going to pan out in November. But the consistency of these numbers is of note, and it matters. And one thing that I mentioned in the talk this morning with Leadership Cobb is that, you look back to like 1988, Michael Dukakis was up 30 points or so over George H.W. Bush in the summer and then went on to lose by a pretty bad margin in November. We don't have those kind of swings in America anymore. We're much too tribalized on both sides. So you see much smaller movement. And this is where voters in suburban metro Atlanta, suburban Philly, Milwaukee, Phoenix, Detroit really are the decision makers on this election. We're so tribalized. There's this handful of people who are willing to vote for one party for president and another party for Senate or U.S. House, or willing to choose between candidates based on more than just their party label. So we may be seeing a hardening of these numbers that show Trump with a big advantage. And if I'm a Democrat, what really scares me isn't just the Georgia numbers, is that Trump is winning in all of the swing states, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, and even more concerning, states that Biden won handily in 2020, including Michigan and Nevada. So that's the big picture here. I think Democrats are beginning to become alarmed. We saw over the holidays that President Obama had gone to the White House and was like, you guys need to get in gear. Take a look at how we did this in 2012 when Americans were uncertain and not happy about the economy, how we ran that race. So I think some of those loud, respected voices in Democratic politics are beginning to rally, and this AJC poll will further those cries, in my opinion.
Any surprises for you, Tharon, when you saw this poll?
So a few things I can address with this poll. Let's start with go in reverse order. My former boss and former president of the United States of America, B.O., as I call him, Barack Obama. I think what he was saying is that it needed to be a little bit more sense of urgency. Not totally agree. And for those of us who just celebrated his historic election in Chicago, I talked about it on this podcast. Hey, we all came back with mandates, with instructions to do our part to make sure we have that sense of urgency. Now, I will tell you this. I am a little concerned that if we don't see some movement in Georgia in the next couple weeks with a highly qualified woman or man to lead Georgia for the Biden-Harris reelection, that's going to tell me two things. One, that's going to tell me that either they got some plan that I don't know about where they think they can really accelerate Biden's numbers here in a very positive direction in a short amount of time. Because, I mean, look, Lisa, we're in January. I mean, this election is in November. And that's not even, counting for early voting and absentee voting, which is how Democrats beat Donald Trump in 2020. We had a great absentee ballot strategy in place. We took advantage of early voting, and we did better than many people thought on Election Day. I think that you're going to see some announcements coming soon in Georgia because they've already started hiring up in other battleground states. The second thing is that, as B. Rob pointed out, there's no way that Donald Trump, I think, is going to get those numbers from African Americans. I mean, he will get probably what he got last time, which was in, the low double digits. He did pretty well with African American males. But I think once this becomes a head-to-head race, you'll see those African American numbers and the Latino numbers sort of go towards Biden. The third thing that the poll really pointed out to me, and B. Rob and I actually experienced it this morning with Leadership Cobb, a lot of those 20% of the undecideds, a lot of those people who are undecided in that poll, it was 20%, are disaffected Republican college-educated white women. The other demographic are independent white men who lean Republican, who probably voted for Donald Trump in 2016, but didn't vote for him again in 2020. And they're like, you know what, I'm undecided right now. So I think where the numbers will break, mark my word on this, for Biden in Georgia is that a lot of those undecideds who are basically answering that poll today or last week or 2 weeks ago when they were asked, once it becomes a head-to-head matchup, the undecideds, I think, will start to break mostly Biden's way. Now, Trump will get some of those folks, too, because, I think some folks just said, hey, you know what, we know who we're getting with him. It's whatever. But I think that the record of accomplishments, the job growth, the wages increase, and different things around public safety, infrastructure, the renewed commitment to do something about gun violence and deaths that we're having all across the country. And look, I also say this. I think that the Democrats need to really have a very honest conversation with each other. And is there some movement for us to really talk about securing the border more? Is there something, if you look at their polling, Lisa, the number one issue for Republicans and all the national polling I've seen, if it's not number one, it's definitely number two, is the issue around immigration. And the thing about why I say that there needs to be more conversations about securing the border is because I think if you look at what the Biden administration has done and is doing now, there's been some improvements there. Whether or not they talk about it, how they talk about it, I'll leave that up to the experts. But I'm just trying to say in the next 30 to 60 days, you'll see Joe Biden, who ran as a moderate Democrat. Let's not forget that, right? He was no left-wing, radical, flaming liberal Democrat. He won the electoral votes by being this sensible, steady-handed leadership, moderate Democrat who took benefit of the blue wall in the Midwest, and we picked up some states like Georgia in the South. And so you'll see, I think, him sort of moving a little bit towards the middle while still shoring up the base.
I think this election comes down to a handful of issues, and Tharon touched on a few of those there. One, the economy. As Tharon intimated, the macroeconomic data is getting much better, 4.9% growth in the third quarter, but Americans aren't feeling it. They still feel squeezed at the grocery store or looking at the price of vacations that they used to be able to afford, et cetera. How are they going to feel next summer? Is this microeconomic data going to go through the system and hit people's pocketbooks? We're already seeing wages going up. Will that begin to change the opinion on the election and the choice? Americans overwhelmingly, in this poll from the AJC shows 3/4 of Georgians think America's going in the wrong direction. Those are deadly numbers for an incumbent seeking re-election to the White House. So will that change over these next 6 months? If it doesn't, I think he's going to lose on that issue. Trump has much better numbers on the economy with voters. Second, as Tharon said, the border. If the border state governors begin sending those buses to Atlanta, oh my God. If we have tent cities of migrants the way they do in Chicago and New York City, it will be political Armageddon for the Democrats. That will really bring it to people's faces. And that's going to be across both parties, more urgently within Republicans, but for independents and for many Democrats too. Look at what the mayor of New York and Chicago, very liberal Democrats, are saying about stop it. This must stop. This is crazy. If that happens here, game changer. Third are the candidates themselves. Americans are worried about chaos and the methods used by Donald Trump, and they're worried about the age and capacity of President Biden. Those things will determine, I think, those couple of things will determine people's votes. And it's just a handful of people, and a lot of them are right here in Atlanta, who will get you to decide.
I was going to say, the poll in general, though, what does it say about the climate here in Georgia, this key battleground state? Is it indicating massive change, Tharon?
Yeah, and look, the voters that I talked to, again, just pointing out the talk that Brian and I had this morning, when I made that comment and I said it, I said, look, I think that Democrats have got to find a way, and I say you adopt the radical right approach to immigration and securing the borders. But if there's an avenue which the president can fully explain that he believes in to basically show that we are securing the border in the right way and actually, doesn't hurt him with the base, I think we should talk about that. The other issue that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but I can't tell you, Lisa, how many women came up to me this morning talking about the issue around abortion and a woman's right to choose and reproductive rights. I mean, that is an issue that Georgia, we talked about it a little bit, but we saw it play a pivotal role in other states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, where it was on the ballot, and Democrats sort of were direct beneficiaries on that issue because the turnout was high and people rejected a lot of these sort of conservative laws around 6-week ban and others. And so I think the climate in Georgia is this. We have a popular governor who, Brian reminds me, stood up to Donald Trump in 2020, and then he went back and kind of endorsed him a little bit. And now I think he's just kind of waiting to see. But the decision he made around COVID was to, obviously people thought that was the right decision. It was a very calculated, risky decision, but it worked out for him. But we still have 2 United States senators who are very popular within the party. Just article this week talked about Senator Warnock and how he's basically not liberal enough from some and actually too radical for others, right? So he's playing that middle. And we got John Ossoff, who is going to be a senator who can stand, if he chooses to, next to a President Joe Biden and not hurt him, right? Does that hurt his chances of help? So I think we're still able to win in Georgia in a presidential election year if the turnout is high. But what concerns me is our ability to get these undecideds to break our way, because you do have an incumbent president with numbers that are not great right now. But I think, again, I've said this, once it becomes a head-to-head match between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I think a lot of those undecideds will break our way. And I think our base will be more fired up, will be more engaged, will be more eager to go out and vote against Donald Trump, because they will be reminded of those 4 years of Trump and how it, disproportionately really affected minorities and the conduct and how he had so many people from his administration who are now in jail, corrupt behavior that he sort of led. I think all these things will come back up, and democracy is on the line. I truly believe that. I think many people believe that if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States again, the country as we know it wouldn't be no more. However, Biden has got to make that argument plain, and he's got to make people believe that reelecting him will make the country better than it is today.
And Lisa, I'll conclude with this. My takeaway is that the fundamentals for Republicans in Georgia are better in 2024 than Republicans, Democrats, Brian Robinson, Tharon Johnson thought was going to be the case 8 years ago, 10 years ago. We really thought the demographic change would have a Democratic advantage. And the Republican majorities here have held longer than I thought that they would. The fact that Republicans can still win here is remarkable to me. The fact that Trump has a lead in the polls in Georgia, the state that rejected him in 2020 by the narrowest of margins, is remarkable. And, hopefully a good sign for Republicans down ballot. But it also shows me that candidates matter. I think a lot of this is about the economy. It's about the border, but some of it's about, Joe Biden's low approval numbers. And where Democrats have been able to capitalize in Georgia and win big seats like the U.S. Senate and to win our electoral votes is when Republicans put forward a candidate that the middle couldn't get around, that enough independents couldn't get around. So I still think that there's a Republican advantage organically in the state, which shocks me to some degree. But Republicans have got to play their A game. If they don't play their A game, they can lose in Georgia.
Brian Robinson is a Republican strategist, communications consultant. And former Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Nathan Deal, Tharon Johnson is a Democratic strategist, public affairs, and government consultant, and most recently a senior advisor to the Biden Georgia campaign. Good to see you both. We'll do it again next week. No Falcons to cheer for, no Bulldogs to cheer for. What? Maybe the Hawks? I don't know.
I'm reading a book.
Yeah, I think look, stay tuned with the Falcons. Let's not hire Bill Belichick, but I think moving on from Arthur Smith was the right decision.
I'm reading Mitt Romney, A Reckoning right now, and so far it's been a really fun read.
All right. See you guys soon.